this series. This series is Happiness Here and Now. The state of the happiness cannot be achieved by any action, thought, and speech. So today's is 15th verse. Do you remember that the first chapter, the master is talking about the very nature of the real self? Because the real self cannot be expressed in language, and still he is pointing out this is what it means by the real self. This is the real self. This is our true nature. So he is pointing differently. That is why we have 20 verses in the first chapter. And the magic starts in the second chapter, where the seeker narrates his own experiences. While listening, he got an awakening. But he was the highest level of a seeker. Nisango nishkriyosi tvam swaprakasho niranjana ayam evahi te bandha samadhim anutisthasi. Such a beautiful nisango nishkriyosi tvam swaprakasho. The real self is like a sun who lights everything, all the objects. I have a camera light here, so it is lighting every object. But I do not need a candle to see this camera light. Camera light is self-effulgent, self-luminous, self-aware force of the thing. That is the nature of the real self. Means what? It indicates that real self is ever present, is always aware, is always self-luminous. That is why I gave an example. Tvam swaprakasho niranjana. The real self is like the sun who lights everything, all the objects of the world, and it also lights itself, because it is the nature of the real self. What is the nature? It is of the nature of consciousness. So how the mind is working? Mind borrows the consciousness from the real self. How the sense organs are working? It borrows the consciousness from the real self. How the body is working? It borrows the consciousness from the real self. We have heard always the big statement when someone dies. What we say? Oh, he has left. No, his body is there. Who has left? That real self. So he is pointing, master is pointing. Nisango, see. We talk of attachment and obsession and craziness and laziness of the mind. The master says that real self is unattached. Forget about attachment. Attachment lives in the mind, not in the real self. Nishkriyusi. That is a little typical. Nishkriyusi means actionless. That is actionless. That doesn't do any karma. As long as I am attached that I did something wrong, I did something right, I have to work hard, that is the ego sense. In fact, that ego sense is absent. So nishkriyusi, actionless, self-luminous, swaprakasho niranjana. Ayam evahi te bandha. So what is the bondage? Why I am suffering? I'm translating and then we will understand this. Ayam evahi te bandha samadhim anutisthasi. What is the bondage? That we practice meditation. That is the bondage. On Mondays and Thursdays, we are doing what we are doing. We are doing meditation practices. Today also we will be doing the meditation practices. So it is for the highest level of a seeker who understands the knowledge is awakened in the mind and you need not to practice meditation. This is what it means. You might have been hearing the great masters, awareness, mindfulness, effortlessness, choiceless awareness. They have taken the teachings from here. So now we will understand what he says. Do you remember the three questions in the beginning? Katham jnanam apnoti, how the knowledge of the real self is attained, how the liberation is attained, and how the dispassion is attained. These three questions. And he is answering, the master is answering by pointing the nature of the real self. So those who have joined for the first time, what we are doing, Eastern wisdom says the real self is behind the body, mind, intellect, and ego. And that real self is of the nature of pure awareness, truth, wisdom, love, and permanent happiness. And it is clouded by the mind because of ignorance. Ignorance causes the impurity, and the impurity veils the real self. That is in the background. Now ask yourself, who is real self? I always used to ask a question: how long it takes you to reach to your workplace? Think in the mind, answer in the mind, from your home. How long it takes you to reach to your workplace? Now answer the next question: how long it takes you to reach to yourself? So normally I receive an answer, oh, it's a lifetime journey. What? Where you are? Do you exist here and now? Are you aware of yourself? And then ask, how long it takes you to reach to yourself? Lifetime? That is the problem of the mind. The mind always thinks in terms of the time and the space and the action. As long as the mind continues to think in terms of time, space, and action, we cannot reach to a meditative state. This is what the master is saying. So, real self is no other than me. You see that? Sorry. I come to you. We say namaste. We say hi. We have to pay respect to each other because we like and love each other. We have to perform certain action to express ourselves. And whatever the expression is, that is in front of the mind. Pay attention to this. I'm doing namaste, so it means I'm doing some gesture, some action by thought, by speech, by action. So the mind always performs every action moving forward. What is meditation? You step back. So here, meditation is a journey to step back, go back, move behind. I look at you, that is the mind. When I look back, I see who is looking you. Are you getting it? Who is looking at you? So I have to live in that awareness of a knower. The moment you become aware of how to step back by knowledge, by understanding, you can enter into the state of meditation. So, what I have to do to step back? Do I need to think? No. Do I need to perform any action? No. Do I need to offer anything? No. So when I go back, when I step back behind the mind, I become aware. I become seeker. I become seeker. Knowledge. Knowledge demands understanding. But what happens? We always try to understand with reference to an object outside. Take one example again. I want to know you. An example, I want to know Terry. So you see that, become aware of it. So I know Terry at a particular place, in a particular time, with a particular gender. You see that? So, lot of things. The mind starts working, 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 working. And now, reverse, I want to know myself. I want to know myself. I have to step back. I have to move the mind from outside to inside. This is what this verse is talking about. Knowledge of the real self begins with knowing as it is. Another point. We need to contemplate and reflect. We have already discussed as long as the mind is impure, we cannot become a seeker. And when we are not a seeker, this journey may confuse you. In fact, I'm here to confuse you guys. Why? You are already confused. You already blame and complain that you have stress, anxiety, duality, and conflict. Our masters say they do not exist. So I want to remove your confusion by confusing you a little more in other direction. Knowledge of the self begins with knowing as it is. I'm going a little deeper. So I just explained, if I want to know Terry, I know by name, example, place, time, gender, color, age, profession, occupation. But I want to know Terry. Terry's parents, her parents. Hold on. When I know Terry is a Terry, Terry is made up of physical matter, isn't it? Carbs, protein, isn't it? Pay attention. That is where the little ignorance is there. The ignorance is there. And when I understand that all our bodies is made up of the matter, then where the matter is present. So normally we say, briefly that this body is made up of five elements. Where these five elements exist? In the mind. Where the mind exists? In the ego sense. And where the ego sense exists, it exists in the real self. That is the way we step back. And everything is absorbed into the real self. And the moment we live into that awareness, we find our true nature. That is one way to say that we step back from. There is another way to understand, but we need to contemplate and reflect. We call ourselves as a human being. Human part that appears is constantly changing. That human part is the body, breath, mind, intellect, ego, thought, blame, complaint, anxiety, stress, duality, all happens in the human part. And what about the being? Being is consciousness. Consciousness cannot be divided. So when I step back, I settle into that consciousness, and that consciousness takes me to the realization of my true nature. Last point, and then uh, I think Ashok and these day people know they have visited the ashram and the monastery of my master in Rishikesh. So my master had an image, a stone, a sculpture of a dead body. It was lying, and my master has covered that dead body with an orange colored cloth. And it is put into a glass box so that everyone can see it. So, what is written there, Ashok? Do you remember? So, he has written in bold letters. What is written in bold letters? That whatever we think we are will be gone, whether it is wealth, power, possession, attachment, will go by the death. But something leaves the body is our real self. Returning again, the master is saying the nature of the real self is self luminous, self effulgent. Exactly the same electricity. We have a grid in the Gilbert, and then we receive electricity another point, from another point. So, what the master is saying that we should go to the origin, the very cause of it. The body I am moving, I feel it is alive. It is because of the same consciousness borrowed from the mind goes into the body and the sense organs. The last point, if you get it, we have to contemplate and reflect. I see you. You are an object. Sense organ is the seer and the knower. First stage. Second stage, who knows the all the sense organs? The mind. So mind is the seer. Sense organs are the objects. Sense organs cannot know the mind. Objects, any object cannot know the sense organ. Sense organ cannot know the mind, but mind knows the sense organ. So, what it means? What is behind? When I step back, I know, I know who is seeing this. So now see the first is the entire world perceived by the sense organs. Sense organs are the seer and the knower. But who knows the sense organs? It is the mind. Sense organs are the objects. Now question comes, who knows the mind? It should be behind the mind. The way sense organs are behind the objects, so sense organs know the world. Mind is behind the sense organs, so mind knows the world. Who is behind the mind? Who is the knower of the mind? Who is the seer of the mind? Is the real self. It is here and now. And now answer the question how long it takes you to reach to yourself. There is no time, there is no space. I am here and now. Happiness is here and now. Close your eyes. Let us start our journey, and then we will